Hello and welcome to this tutorial slash walkthrough on using the basics of the terrain system set up for Unity 3D. In this tutorial we're just going to go over the very basic basics of setting up a very simple terrain. Alright, so first thing we'll go and do is we'll go to Game Object, 3D Object, and Terrain. And go ahead and open up my, I always forget to do this, but alright, so we want to choose Terrain, and we'll see that we end up with a very large what looks like a plane, and it is a plane. If you look on the bottom, it's transparent going through the bottom, so it only has one side for normals. And this terrain is gigantic. So just to illustrate just how gigantic it is, let's add a let's go ahead and take a look at the terrain width and height. Right now it's set at 500. Really this isn't that large, but just to illustrate just how large it actually is, let's go in and add some textures to this. Now textures, you can think of textures in this instance just like in just about every other instance. Textures are paint, the color information of whatever we're working with. Now over here we can see the paint texture button opens up this different look inside of the inspector, and we have different brushes that we can choose, and we have this edit textures, which we'll come back to in a moment, brush size, opacity, and target strength. We can also apply a physics material, so whenever something touches this material, what will it feel like? What kind of resistance will it offer? Maybe we want to have a rubbery or a wood terrain. We want it to feel like ground, whatever. So first thing you need to always do is select a texture. Now the first texture that you add to this terrain is always going to automatically apply to everything. So keep that in mind, that you don't want to just, okay, I want to add these 3 or 4 textures, I want some mountains, I want some grass, etc. and so on, and then the first thing you add is mountains. Well, that's going to apply it to the entire terrain. The first one that you add is the one that you plan on making the overwhelming majority of the coverage to this terrain should be your first texture that you choose. Now you can see over here we can assign an albedo, and we can also assign a normal map for this first texture. I'm just going to choose a very simple grass texture. Let's see, this looks okay. And I'm not really going, I don't know, does this one have a normal map? No, it doesn't. Alright, well, we'll just go with this one for now. Click Add, and immediately we can see that this texture has been applied to this terrain. Now, before we get into brush size and stuff, we need to actually have a secondary texture to actually paint on top of the grass. So I'll go Add Texture. We'll add another texture. And let's see. I'll get Grass Rocky Albedo. I'll add that. Now nothing changes on my terrain. And if I set my brush, you can see that the blue area is where I'll be painting. But the thing about it is the reason it's not actually painting is because you need to select which texture you're going to be painting with. Alright, now as I click, nothing's happening. And why not? Well, you also need to set your opacity and target strength. Now, opacity is how opaque it's going to be, but you also need to have target strength. You can think of the strength as being how much per click is it actually going to apply that texture. Okay. Now we can change the brush size, and you see the blue area gets larger. And if we leave everything up to 1, you'll see that this texture completely replaces the green grass texture. Well, not completely, pretty close. No, it does actually, because there's some green here. I didn't see the green. Alright, so we can always select the other texture and go back and paint that again. If I set the target strength down a little bit, it's more of kind of a blending in slowly but surely. Okay, you can kind of see the difference there. But the target strength this is like the limit. Okay, it's only going to apply this much of the color. And as I set it up, you can kind of see the 3 circles here. Alright, it won't get any darker than what I set it right here. So if I set it all the way up to 1 now, you can kind of see it's almost like a bullseye effect here. So this is kind of the limit that you're going to set. Now if you want to set it to where, if you want to set it like a blend, what you want to mess with is the opacity. Okay. Now the opacity makes it to where every couple of clicks it blends a little bit more, and the more I use it, the more it will actually be applied. So you can kind of mess with these to actually figure out which one or which settings are the settings you kind of want to work with. Alright, so just remember that target strength is kind of setting the upper limit for how much of this texture will be applied. Now with terrains, obviously just having this set up to color some grass and mountain or different areas is all well and good, but that's not really what makes a terrain a terrain. What makes a terrain is valleys and mountains and etc. and so on. So to get into that, we'll go to this one, the Raise Lower Terrain button. Now the brush will look very similar. We see the same thing here, brush size, opacity. But what has changed is that this is actually going to change the shape of the terrain. We can add mountains. Okay. Now if we hold down Shift, we push down. Okay. So if I take my brush size all the way up and kind of makes a mountainous region, and then I decide, well, I want to have like a valley in the middle, then I hold down Shift and I can push this down. Okay. And of course I want to build that up around. Now playing with the brushes is And I definitely recommend playing with them so you can kind of get a feel for what they do. See that we made a little star area here with the brush of just mountainous terrain. Now to smooth this out, we want to use the smooth height button, this one right here, and we can go in and smooth out all the rough edges. Now, if you've seen any of my ZBrush tutorials, I definitely recommend using a pen pad and a pen, so a Wacom tablet or something like that, for doing ZBrush, and I do actually recommend it for this as well, especially if you're going to go in and do some very fine details. Now, if your plan is to make something for mobile devices, there are better solutions for making terrains than using the built-in Unity terrain. The thing is that you kind of see there's a lot of geometry here that you really don't need necessarily, and this will definitely have a large impact on your processing power. Now, for mobile devices, you need all of the for any application, you need all the processing power that you can get, but especially for mobile devices. Alright, so I'll switch back to shaded mode so you can see what's going on. Now, the paint height lets you kind of just set a height automatically. See, I can click this. Alright, and it will set a height accordingly. Now it can be raised or it can be lowered depending on where the terrain currently is. So right now I have it set to just be 17, and 17 is lower than these mountains currently are, so it actually lowers them. Now for areas that are lower than 17, it would raise them. Say for example this little plateau here, this area on the bottom over here is lower than the 17 that has the rest of it set, so it actually raised that area up. Alright, so if you're going to have any bodies of water or any kind of hills going down, I always suggest that you start with the paint height brush, and then that way you can go into the raised lower terrain and then kind of go in and paint kind of what you're working with or what you're looking for as far as a body of water. And go in and smooth out the edges there. And go paint height, maybe set it a little bit higher. Go. Okay. And obviously if you don't want to do the set height kind of thing here, you can always have more control by changing your brushes and doing it manually. Use my smoothing brush. Now, I'm not going to really demonstrate how to get the exact setting that you want. This is more of an art than a science. It's just you have to experiment with it, and make heavy use of the undo hotkey to kind of get the look that you are hoping to get. Alright, so next section. First of all, I want to go in and I want to paint some mountainous kind of a look here. Set my target strength down, come in, and I'll build this up. By building up, I mean you apply the base of your mountain texture first before you get into the stronger highlight. Alright, something like this. And then I can go and set the opacity up a little bit, maybe throw it in a little bit randomly. Then I'll set it up all the way to the top. Go in and at the very top of my mountains, kind of set that up there. Should have maybe spent a little bit more time on the mountains themselves, but you get the idea. You want to kind of break it up. You don't want to have too much one color in any one place. Come back in with your opacity, with your grass color, and kind of come in and fix any rough spots. But you get the idea. Alright, so with that done, and I definitely would spend a lot more time on this if I was doing this for production. But let's go into the next parts of the terrain system. Alright, so let's say we have our terrain set up and it looks very bland right now. The reason there's no foliage. So let's go and add some trees. So we have our little tree button here, and we can paint some happy little trees to, what was that guy's name? Something Ross. It's a long time ago, a painter used to say that, a TV painter. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define some trees. So go edit, add trees. Now these trees that we're defining are 3D models. Now it can be an actual tree, or you can actually use other things and place them as trees. For example, if you're making a post-apocalyptic world, maybe you want to set some old broken cars and stuff like that. Let me see. Do I not have any trees imported? Here we go, conifer. Alright, let's do a broadleaf mobile. Alright, so broadleaf mobile, where did it go? Okay, so I'll click add, and now I have this tree. And if I click, you can see I place a large section of trees. And if I go into my wireframe, you can see that they are pretty dense when it comes to geometry. So just like the terrain itself, you want to really kind of be easy with just how many trees that you're going to set down. Alright, throw some trees in here, and I can set random height, or I can actually set them to be a little bit taller or a little bit smaller, whatever fits your fancy. You can choose things like setting the width of the trees. Maybe you want some underbrush. But of course there are models for that. Alright, so that's putting down trees. Now, alright, so one more thing that you can do is you can click this button here. It says place mass trees. Now when I click this, it asks me how many trees I want to place, and do I want to keep the existing trees. I'll go ahead and uncheck that, and I'll set it to be maybe 200 trees. Place, and it will just randomly place the trees throughout the map. Okay. Now you can look here and see, hold down Shift to erase the trees, or hold down Control to erase the selected tree type. So if you have multiple trees, so I can go add another tree, and here I'll select the conifer, and I'll put some of those down. But let's say, oh wait, okay, I want conifers here, but I don't want, I think it actually deleted the other one. Oh, there we go. Alright, so now I can put down some conifers, but then I say, okay, well, I want this to be a conifer forest. I don't want to have any broadleaves. So I can hold down Control, and you'll see those other trees get deleted. Now I can hold down Shift and delete all the trees. Okay. Alright, so finally we'll go take a look at the flowers. Okay, now what these are going to be, they're not really flowers, they're 2D images that always face the camera. So I'm going to add a grass texture, and let's see, I'll choose this. Alright, and it needs to be one of the ones labeled alpha, so it's going to have some transparency. So what I can do is now take this and just kind of paste it in, or kind of paint it in. Now another thing to keep in mind is that this has no geometry, but it still affects your CPU cycles. Alright, so again, I can hold down Shift and erase all of this, which I will do. Some of it you can't even see. Alright, so whenever I paint this, I'm going to take it, yeah, see, some of it I couldn't even see until I zoomed in close enough. I'm going to take my target strength down, my opacity down, and you can see now that that's a little bit more manageable. Okay. Alright, so I have all this grass put in, I have my terrain put in. And let's say, what if I want to change my brush a little bit? I can. You can see that you can use your brush to determine how the grass will be laid down. And you can add other details, of course. Let's say maybe I want to grab this car. I'm not sure if this will work or not. No, that's not going to work. some meshes you can actually throw in and add detail like that. It usually has to be a 2D image anyway. Let's remove that. Now if you have one of your details loaded and you say, well, you know what, I don't really want that anymore, I want to take all of that away, instead of holding shift and going in and deleting all that, the thing to keep in mind is if you delete it from the details, all of the painting you've done with that detail is gone as well. So I'm going to undo that. Alright, so let's go ahead and see how this will work. Just going to take a pretty simple prefab, the first person controller included in the standard assets, and that's another thing. Most of these grass and tree models that I've used, they come with the standard assets, so you'll have to import standard assets to really be able to use the ones that I've used. Alright, so I'll just take my first person controller and set him down and raise him up so he doesn't sink through the ground. Now I can hit play, and now I have the basis of some sort of game where I'm running around a field. And you can see the wind is actually blowing that grass to kind of give a realistic feel to it. Although it doesn't look realistic, you could really put some normal maps and stuff in with some of these textures and really make it look legit. Alright, so that's a quick overview of the terrain system and some of the settings. I definitely didn't cover everything, so I do invite you to check it out on your own and do some experimentation. Alright, have a good night, morning, evening, whatever time it is for you. And if you're in my course, I'll see you in class. Otherwise, thanks for watching.